Hello and welcome to Multiple Shenanigans, the Creamy White Improv episode. I'm Letitia.
And I'm Jeanette.
And this week we have a guest with us.
Jess.
Welcome, Jess.
Thank you.
So Jess here is an improviser like myself. Do you want to say a little bit about yourself, Jess?
Yeah, so I'm Jess Napthine-Hodgkinson and I run Glossop Improv because I'm based in the lovely town of Glossop in Derbyshire in the UK. And I also moderate Brain Fog Improv, which is a community for improvisers with unseen conditions. And I also have MS.
So I was virtually introduced to Jess via one of my improv teammates. And he said to me, you've got to get in touch with Jess, because I said I was doing this podcast. And he said, she's like you, she has MS, and she's really funny. So I was like, again. Obviously, the Brain Fog Improv thinks a lot about kind of difficulties with MS and stuff. But did you do improv before MS or?
Yeah, I've been doing improv for about 15 years and I only got diagnosed with MS about 3 years ago. So so it's nice to finally get an explanation for why I suddenly get bouts of brain fog and other symptoms. So the improv predated the MS.
So did you notice at some point just like a change in it?
Well, it's one of those things that I think it's really difficult to pinpoint, like when you first noticed symptoms, because like some of the symptoms of MS, like poor balance, well, I've always had poor balance. So I don't know whether that's MS. Maybe I'm just a poorly balanced person, or maybe, clumsiness. I've always been quite clumsy. I don't know whether that's related to the MS or whether it's like, just happens that I am clumsy and have MS rather than one causing the other.
That's interesting, because I only came to improv with MS. Sounded like I bought it as a gift. Improv, it's me, my MS. But it was like I'd suddenly got, it sounds ridiculous, but the space in my life to do something that I might not have done before. So it's quite interesting to see it the other way around.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell whether I've used improv techniques to cope with some of the symptoms of my MS, like, but sort of being able to kind of push through fatigue, through the adrenaline of improv and spontaneity and things like that. I think I've definitely used adrenaline as a drug to get me through kind of bouts of fatigue and things like that. And like the brain fog, it's interesting that I've chosen to do this hobby that is all about like mental elasticity and agility and having to think quickly and try and do lots of things at once and get your head around lots of processes going in different directions at the same time, all of which are things that don't naturally sit with having MS. MS you would think would be sort of a real problem for being able to do those things. So I don't know whether one has kind of kept the other at bay, sort of thing.
One of the things Jeanette and I were saying in the previous episode was that perhaps the fact that we have to think around things because we can't go straight there because of the brain fog, it helps us with improv and with poetry and just getting somewhere, but from a different direction.
Yeah, that feeling of when you forget a word, or when that you know a thing and it's just not there. It's not in the drawer that it normally sits in your brain, and you have to find a different way. Like recently, I was trying to tell my husband that we needed to have broccoli with the tea, like what we were making for tea. And I said, can you get me and I got as far as there, and I was like, what's the word for it? The nearest I could get was little green trees. Little green trees. So yeah, I think that sort of lends itself well to the sort of the lateral thinking aspect of improv. and poetry, I guess, as well.
Life becomes one long metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
We would normally start our episodes by asking how your week's been or what shenanigans you've been up to this week. So, Jess, what shenanigans have you been up to this week?
So, what day are we on?
We had that discussion too earlier.
It's like, what have I been doing? Yesterday I had an improv rehearsal straight after work, so that was really nice.
Can I just ask a question? To my mind, an improv and rehearsal seem a little bit contradictory.
Yeah, I knew that was going to be your question, because every time I say improv rehearsal to somebody that doesn't do improv, they're like, what?
Cheat. You're cheating.
But yeah, I understand that confusion. So I've recently joined a new improv team, and we are getting ready to do our first show. So the rehearsals are firstly to kind of get to grips with how people work together and to try and get a bit of an insight into sort of how other people think and what kind of scenes we like to do, what kind of scenes we don't want to do, and then kind of look at like the form of the show and what we want that show to be. So I fully appreciate that an improv rehearsal sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it's just it's still made up on the spot, but it's just we're trying to kind of like we're in the lovely getting to know each other phase.
It's a bit like football practice or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like just testing your skills and
yeah, absolutely. Or like a band practice or something. Yeah.
Jeanette, what have you been up to? What shenanigans have you been up to lately?
Well, I started doing all the things that other people did at the start of lockdown. It's taken me this long to get to be proper. So, do you know I was saying about the keyboard? Trying to learn. But I've got that slow hand problem as well. So I'm like, I don't stretch very far with my hands. That seems to be an issue. But I'm persevering. And then I'm also trying to rewrite those things that I've had metaphorically in a drawer for ages and ages. So I'm trying to do that. I'm just trying to be a better me.
So the keyboard that you mentioned was your music keyboard?
Well, strictly not, because the one that I had got it all out, all excited, and the batteries were still in it from a long time ago, and they'd corroded.
Oh no!
But there was a reserve keyboard, which
a backup keyboard.
Yeah, it's a bit older and it's a bit dirty. Me and my dirty keyboard.
The blues.
But I'm having a go, basically. I'm having a go, and intermittently rewatching. I've watched a bit of it, but The West Wing. I'd only seen, I think, from the last few, and I knew that President Bartlett also had MS, but I didn't know how much it was big in the story. That wasn't the reason that we were rewatching it. It just so happened.
Actually, I'd completely forgotten until you said that. I did watch it years ago, but I completely forgot that he has MS.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. Although some bits, I'm like, I know it's different for everybody, but I'm not sure that doesn't seem quite right to me.
I was just trying to think of any other programs with characters with MS, and they had somebody in EastEnders not that long ago who had primary progressive, I think, and committed suicide. So that's not really a cheerful or positive image, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that. When they show MS, they tend to kind of go big with it. They're like, let's go for the most severe end scale. But then in real life, sometimes you'll tell somebody that you've got MS. And I had this conversation with a colleague of mine, and she didn't mean to be sort of a catastrophist about it, But she then told me a story about her friend who had primary progressive MS and who had like the worst kind of progression of her illness imaginable, and just a really unpleasant life and then death. And I was just like, oh, thanks, okay. But I think she sort of did it because she wanted to kind of talk about, obviously, about her friend, but at the same time sometimes she's just like, oh, that's not quite the kind that I have, and hopefully that's not gonna, I'm not gonna get to that point where your friend was. I think sometimes people just don't think through the sort of connotations for it for the other person.
I think that happens with a lot of things. But I do that. It's like, I broke my finger. Yeah, I broke my finger and it turned into gangrene. It fell off. I think it's worth pointing out, though, the statistic that only 5% of people with MS ever use wheelchairs. So, which a lot of people don't realise. That you've got MS, that means you end up with that, but that's not necessarily the truth at all.
Nancy in Hollyoaks has got it.
Has she?
Yeah.
See, I don't watch Hollyoaks. I missed that.
No, you really shouldn't. This is so wrong, and I've said this. No. But Nancy had it coming, really, because she's just a terrible character.
Oh dear.
We can edit that out. That's a bit wrong.
It's a bit wrong.
And you shouldn't watch Hollyoaks. No offence to anybody who does, but I'm going to stop talking about this now.
I've had one of those weeks where you're just kind of waiting in for things. And I was explaining this to my friend earlier, just before we started this. I was on the phone to a friend and said, what have you been up to? And I said, oh, I've had one of those waiting in weeks, because on Monday I was waiting in for British Gas, and on Tuesday I was waiting in for Severn Trent, and on Wednesday I was waiting in for O2. And they went, hang on, we're only on Tuesday. It's like, I've waited in an extra day that hasn't even existed yet. Not that I'm going out.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's pretty much always a waiting in week at the moment.
It's just fluid now. We're waiting in. Someone might turn up, someone might not.
But the good news is I've got heating in all of my radiators now. So that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Jess, we pick a colour thing, dress in it, because sometimes stories come from the outfits we've chosen to go with the colour theme. Sometimes they don't. I
chose this colour theme because I bought this new jumper, and if you can see, it's got some frames on it. Because I've kind of gone on a bit of a like an eBay binge, but purely for jumpers. Because like jumpers you can get away with, because if they're a bit big, it's fine. If they're a bit small, it's also fine because they might stretch. But it's getting to the point where I'm kind of buying one jumper a week. I was thinking this isn't sustainable.
Do you need to go to Jumpers Anonymous?
I think I need to.
That really is a lovely jumper.
I like the crane detail, and in fact, a friend of mine runs a poetry group called Paper Cranes. I bet she'd be very envious of that jumper.
Well, just look out on eBay, because there'll be some more of them floating about.
Jeanette, do you have a creamy white story?
Well, I thought I did. I was like, oh, this is the outfit I wore to do my first stand-up show. And, well, not show, spot, 5 minutes. And then just before, I realised, no, it's not. It was a slightly similar one. So I'd had some kind of false memory about the outfit. And then I was just thinking, I hope I don't do that often. One of my biggest paranoias in life, we were talking last time about how sometimes an MS brain makes us interrupt people and say things when because they're in your mind, you want to say them quickly because you'll forget, or you have a lack of impulse control or something like that. And I'm always worried that I just sound like such a crazy person. That gives the impression that I'm lying. somebody will say something and I'll go, oh yeah, this. And it's almost like I'm too quick to want to say about a specific thing. So it sounds like I just made it up. And I'm really paranoid that I think that the people think I'm lying. And I hardly ever lie. Virtually no, I can't say never, but everybody does a little bit. But yeah.
I have a similar thing that I worry about. Sometimes I'm so totally convinced about something, I'll tell somebody and convince them about it. And I've got one friend who after a bit says, did you just make that up? And I really, really don't know sometimes.
Wow, so you've been called on it.
Yeah.
I've never had that. I've just made it up myself that I think that they think that.
But you've got away with it. That's what it is.
No, I'm not lying.
I'm a very bad liar. For somebody, and people think that because I do improv, they're like, oh well, you must be quite a good liar because you're having to come up with stuff, off the cuff kind of thing. But I'm like, I naturally kind of feel a lot of guilt, even if I've done nothing wrong. So I think as soon as I lie, it's just all over my face. I'm like, don't let them know that you're lying. And whenever I've played kind of bluffing games or things like that, because like my friends and I play a lot of board games, and there's one called Avalon, which is all about kind of bluffing and things like that. And there's a couple of characters in it, which if you get made that character, you have to lie to be able to protect your identity, because if somebody finds you out, then they can kill you and then the game's over, kind of thing. So I'm just sat there going, please don't let me be Merlin. Please don't let me be Merlin. Because I can't handle the pressure of lying.
But you've played your poker.
Yeah, but I play poker really, like, honestly, really, really honestly. So but now I've got a little bit better at it because I play it really, really honestly, like 98% of the time. And it's just like a little 2% of bluffing. But then, because I only play it against my husband, whenever I've bluffed successfully, I get really excited about it, because then afterwards I'm just like, ha, I was bluffing then, I was bluffing and you didn't know. Which sort of kind of ruins the effect of having bluff.
But it can work to your advantage, because I play poker too, and I was playing really honestly at first, and people started to think that I would never bluff, and then like started eking out little bluffs, and then it's very satisfying. Like, I did it and you still didn't, and I didn't tell anyone. I would never reveal it. But it's like
So can I just interject here? So you two both play poker and you both bluff, and that's a bit like lying, and you're doing it deliberately, whereas I accidentally am convinced of something being true and it's not. I think I should take up poker instead.
You absolutely should. Well, yeah. I wrote a little a blog about how playing poker, like learning to play poker, is like when you start out with improv, because when you start playing poker, because you don't really know what's a good hand or a bad hand, you don't know when you should bet, when you should call, when you should fold. So you just kind of play by instinct with what feels right. So you're completely unreadable to the other person. So with you not knowing whether you were bluffing or not, it would be perfect. You'd be a brilliant poker player.
But I think that they're both kind of good, but also hard for an MS brain, because they demand that you're focused. So as long as you're on a good day and you're probably slept well and all the good things that you're supposed to do, it's really good to be able to focus into something, and it's so in the moment that it stops me from going off on one, and especially live poker, because you can't just get up and start cooking something and then walk away and do all the things that I do with other things. And the same with improv. You can't just go off on one in the same way. So it's great for that, but also it's hard because of that. And lies, both. I never thought of another connection being lies. I just said that I never lie, and my two hobbies are pretty much you have to.
Poets do tell lies as well, because they're not lies, but a lot of audiences assume that the poetic voice is the author, and it often isn't. But especially if you perform your own poetry, when it's on the page, there's people might read it slightly more ambiguously. But when I do performance poetry, well, I read my poetry live, and people always presume it's about whoever is performing it. So I guess that's kind of lying as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you go live next time, when the real world is back, I'm going to come heckle you. Liar!
And I'm coming to improv. That's true. That's true.
She's not improvising. That's actually true.
You were telling us about your Brain Fog Improv?
Yes. Yeah, there was a group that I set up on Facebook towards the end of last year, I think it was. Just to have a space for improvisers that have any kind of unseen condition, not just MS, but anything else as well, that they could just come and talk about their experiences and share any tips or resources or anything like that. Because I was coming across a lot of people, and especially now when we're in sort of quite stressful times where symptoms get exacerbated, and also people might not have the same level of healthcare that they had prior to COVID. Just for people to have a bit of a community where they could talk with other people that understand and that aren't just going to kind of offer sympathy, because like sort of pity type things, because I think Facebook, is sometimes not a great place to share things about yourself, because you get like lots of people going, oh, so sorry for you, and things like that, which is lovely and it's coming from the best place. But at the same time, sometimes you want other people that are like, oh yeah, I've had that experience too. This is how I got around it. This is what worked for me, or this is what really didn't work for me. So maybe something to avoid. And just to have that kind of a space where anybody can kind of come along, and if you just want to vent, it's quite a nice place to, and because it's a private group, nobody else outside the group can see it. So sometimes you might just want to go, I'm having a terrible day, I'm feeling absolutely shattered, I've got terrible brain fog, I've got terrible aches and pains, and not have that on your main Facebook feed for everybody to kind of sort of chip in with things. It's just a good place, and people will just go, yep, same. that's sort of the vibe that there is there. But it's become quite a nice place. We've got quite a few people that are in the improv community, but they don't have conditions and they want to know more about how they can support people that do. So it's become quite a nice place for sort of a bit more raising awareness and sort of education, as well as having a sort of a personal community space.
I did watch one of your there was a YouTube interview that you did with a guy in America. I'm afraid I've forgotten his name.
David Escobedo.
Oh, that sounds like it. Yeah, you were talking about improv and things, and one of the things that I picked up on, you were talking about in the real world, in the before times, when you were at an improv event, that everything was done standing up.
Yeah,
and that resonated quite a lot with me, with performance poetry and things. It's like you go on the stage, you stand at the microphone and you perform, and not everybody A can stand, or B can reach the microphone, and these things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that really made me think about performance spaces and how it's changed with being online. And as an event organizer, I used to host poetry events and things. One of the most frustrating things of living in, we live in Nottingham, which is an old city, is accessible venues. absolute nightmare. And if you get an accessible venue, have you got an accessible stage?
Yeah.
And one of the nicest things during lockdown is don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, because everybody is comfortable. And yeah, I think there's going to be a big change in the way that events are, or I hope there will be, because hopefully people will have learned from this whole experience that people can like perform just as well, if not better, when they are sat down, when they are comfortable in, you know, in whatever position is right for them. Yeah, and default setting of somebody standing on a stage, I think is that's probably going to be kind of a bit of a thing of the past.
Do you think online performances and events will continue once people are able to mix again?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with improv, certainly it's opened up so much in terms of being able to improvise from people from different countries, and you know, across different time zones and all of that kind of stuff, that I think we would really miss it if we just decided like, oh, okay, we can go outside again, so you know, that's the end of online improv. I don't think it's going to happen, because I think people have made such strong connection. It's like, you know, the team that I've just joined has got, you know, people in like 4 or 5 different countries in it, across different time zones completely. I don't quite know how people in the Philippines seem to be able to be in the same improv spaces as people in North America, but you're just like, well, hang on, there's over 12 hours, or, you know, sometimes more between you guys, and I can't work out when some people in the online world sleep, because like I'll be sat there thinking I've got my head around all these time zones, and then I'll be like, yeah, but isn't it 3 a.m. where you are? And just be like, yep. And yeah, there's just such enthusiasm for getting together with people. I don't know whether maybe people are trying to sort of make the most of it while they can, thinking that perhaps it might not be as prevalent. I think the balance will certainly shift. I think there will maybe be less of the online stuff, but I don't think it will go away. I really hope it doesn't.
How are you finding audiences? Because from poetry world is very similar. I was in the United States only last night, for example. But at the moment, I found at the beginning there were lots of people attending everything, but the audiences have dropped back, obviously, because we've all got a lot of Zoom fatigue, I think, and online fatigue. But for performers, I think it's still, as you say, it's a really nice connected space, and people can access from all over the world, literally all over the world. And also, I think some groups, I'm in a poetry group called Social Model Writers, which are people with various different conditions that affect their lives. And we've got together and we created a performance for Nottingham Poetry Festival last year. And again, it was that it's so much easier doing it on Zoom, and you can also edit. But that we performed as live as that, yeah, because it was a festival. But yeah, there's quite a different concept, and I think we've all learned so many skills of the opportunities of things recorded and filmed and edited, and taking out the bit where the neighbours are having their shopping delivered and you know, or the bit from Jeanette and I's perspective when we've been doing our multiple shenanigans, the bit where we're both kind of going,
forgot what we were doing. Yeah. The trouble is, I think we sometimes, again with the lying, it looks like we don't forget stuff as much as we do forget stuff or stumble on words, or you know, that's part of the art
Yeah, I think with improv, the group that I run, Glossop Improv, we perform sort of monthly, and it was odd to start with, to get used to, because we just stream it on Facebook, so you've got no audience reaction. But I asked all of the people that were performing, like, please keep your microphones on while other people are doing scenes, so that we can at least get your reaction to it. And then I kind of monitor the comments as they come in as well. So we get some feedback, but obviously it's very, very different to what we used to. But so it's a bit more like we're just having a rehearsal, or just having a play with your mates sort of thing. So it's sort of nice in one way, because I think there's less sort of stage fright among people, because you can't see what the audience is looking like, or what they're responding to. And I think that also means that you don't pander to the audience quite so much as you might to a live audience. So you might, in a kind of a live show, particularly with improv, sometimes you'll be like, oh, they really laughed at that, so I'm just going to do more of that, even if whatever it is you've just done is a bit of easy humour or something like that. Whereas doing it without that sort of immediate audience reaction, it sort of forces you to kind of do things properly, and not just rely on pulling silly faces or really dumb jokes. I mean, I have a lot of time for dumb jokes, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think it's been an interesting learning curve.
I think that's why I struggled with it first, because I'm just so needy and just always with the dumb jokes. I'll give you a bit more of this. And it is just so weird not having any confirmation of it being okay. Oh, it's all quiet now.
I think that's interesting that the television panel shows and things, particularly where they were suddenly performing from home, as we are now, and it was flat. You could tell it was flat, and that they weren't getting reactions. And then when they came into the studio with their partitioning off, it got a little bit better. But now they're looking at a bank of people on Zoom as an audience. They have a virtual audience to react from, and it does appear to make a difference to them. Yeah. So with poetry, we've done one of the groups I'm with, DIY Poets. We have our events on Zoom, so we have our performers and our audience on Zoom. And we, at the beginning, we weren't telling people to mute, but then somebody's phone would go off and they'd start chatting, and somebody's trying to perform, and then you're desperately trying to mute them and things like that. So now we sort of have a bit of a compromise in that we mute all the audience, but unmute them.
Yeah.
To give some reaction, some feedback, but because there's a slight pause, slight delay, it's still different. But at least you can see people, which to me makes a difference.
That trouble though, sometimes I apologise to anybody who's watched this and seen that I have a terrible resting apathy face. So if I was watching anybody's comedy or poems or something, I'm like this.
I have the same problem.
Couldn't care less. And I don't. It's not the way.
Yeah, I look like I'm really disappointed in whatever somebody is doing to me. My thinking face is like this. And it's just so blank, and it's so, yeah.
But if you try not to be, if you try and be like smiling, it's like getting back to the lion thing, isn't it? Like,
yeah. I deliver sessions for researchers to help them enhance their public speaking skills, like using improv techniques. And one of the questions that I always get asked is like, what do I do if people don't look like they're enjoying it? And so I always use that as a kind of a response. It's like, this is what my listening face looks like. and I always remind them, like, when they are in an audience, to be a good audience member, and even if it feels a bit false, to try and do all of the active listening things of like,
Maybe that's what we need. We need to be training audiences rather than performers. Because normally when you're performing, you look at, I'm short-sighted, so I read my notes. So I can't wear my glasses because I can't read my notes. So I'd rather read my notes and not see the audience. And that's great because I can focus on the audience like you're supposed to. Only I have no idea who it is or what they're doing. So it's just a blob over there. So I'll read that line to that blob and I'll read that line to that blob. But I don't have the clarity that I suddenly have now of faces on the screen, because they were just like fuzzy blobs.
Yeah, I have the same thing. Yeah, without these, I'm short-sighted, so that, you know, if I take these off, I can still see, you know, both of you, like my screen distance. But if I was on stage, then yeah, I wouldn't be able to pick out anybody's faces, which is such a gift. You know, when you're on stage, you're just like, oh, I'm so glad I can't see anybody's expression.
Yeah, so what we need to do is Zoom train audiences.
Yeah.
To do, as you say, active listening.
You're very active, running and things.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I normally run 20k on a Saturday, and I do various kind of bits of exercise during the week.
Can I just go back to that? 20k,
Yes.
as in 20 kilometres, as in a very long way?
Well, I thought it was quite a long way, but there's a thing, when it comes to running, there's always somebody that runs further, and that person always lets you know. So much so that I was on my run on Saturday, and I reached a pedestrian crossing, so I was waiting at the crossing, and at the other side of this crossing, sort of standing back a little bit, was this woman with her dog, and she sort of stood there and was looking at me. And I thought, I don't think I know this woman, but she seems to want to talk to me. She said, "Oh, sorry to bother you, but I've seen you run around a few times, like I've seen you sort of a few weekends now running around and around the reservoirs and things like that." She said, "Are you a long distance runner?" And I said, "Oh, well, I do 20k." She said, "Oh, because I'm looking for somebody to kind of train with and to find some routes with for the Manchester Marathon." And I was thinking, oh, this really burst my bubble. Thinking I was doing really well with my sort of almost half marathon, and then there's somebody that's just like, is seemingly just seeking me out, tell me to run further.
Wait. I was going to say, wait till she meets that round the world runner.
Yeah.
Well, or Eddie Izzard.
Yeah. Well, one of my friends, my friend Susie, who used to live in Glossop and moved out of Glossop just before I moved into Glossop. I don't think the two things were connected. I don't think she was trying to get away from me. But she is an ultra runner. So she runs ultra marathons that are like 100-mile marathons.
What?
Yeah. And I don't get it. Like, she can run 100 miles like without stopping to have a sleep. I just thought, I don't know. I don't understand how you can do that.
That's
yeah. Well, I was quite proud of myself earlier today until you started talking, Jess. I took my car for its MOT and I walked back, and then I walked back to pick up my car and bring it home, and that was 10 minutes each way.
But I'm in no way kind of precious about running. Like, I think if anybody can get out and do anything, walking, running, it's so good for you. I mean, running is probably quite bad for you. It's very bad for your knees. So, you know, if you can get out and walk, do lots of walking. That's much better.
You should have said that to the woman on the crossing, like, yeah, but your knees.
Your knees are gonna be.
So I think we've covered everything. We've got a cat with us now, which is a beautiful addition as always. Hi, Dixie.
Good to have you, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jess, for joining us. It's been brilliant. Really, it's like you say, it's good to see how everything interlinks.
Well,
yeah.
thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh,
Yes.
excellent.
Thank you, Jess.
So that's been our creamy white edition of Multiple Shenanigans with the topic of improv. I've been Jeanette.
I've been Letitia, and our guest has been
Jess.
So if you've enjoyed today's episode, if you'd like to subscribe to us on YouTube, you're welcome, or follow us on Facebook. We hope to see you all again soon for more Multiple Shenanigans. Bye.